Hello, this is John Lee from Wealth Dragons, and some of you have been asking me questions. John, how do you buy property using none of your own money? Well, it's very simple. Vincent and I wrote this book. It's called A Step-by-Step Guide to Lease Options. If you go to Amazon, you can go and grab yourself a copy. But one of the things I'm going to teach you right now is from this book. And this is from page number 72, talking about setting the expectation and how you buy property using none of your own money. Well, lease options is very, very simple concept. Well, first of all, what is lease options and how does it work for you? What will it allow you to do? Doesn't matter whether you have a bad credit rating, doesn't matter whether you can't get a mortgage, doesn't matter if you don't have a deposit, you will be able to acquire property using none of your own money. And it's based on terms. So how does this work? Well, the first key here is called lease. So what is a lease? Well, a lease is to rent something. If you've ever heard of leasing a car, you can actually lease a car from someone else, okay? You can lease it from BMW or Lamborghini or Ferrari, wherever it is, you can lease a car, okay? So how does the leasing work? You lease it for, say, 2 or 3 years, and then after 2 to 3 years, you have the option to buy. Well, wouldn't it be great if you could do the same with a house? Okay, so that's the first thing. So if you're watching this video and you're renting a house, you will have a contract where you rent the property from a landlord. Okay, so this contract says that I will rent the property, I will pay you this much rent. That is called a lease agreement, a rent agreement. So how does this work in property? Well, in order for this to work, you have to find something called motivator sellers. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, how that works in a second, but really briefly how this works is finding someone who needs to sell their property rather than wants to sell the property. So let me give an example. Let's just say you find a property and the property is worth 100,000. Let's just say the person has lost their job, they're in arrears, their property, they can't afford to pay for it, so the bank is going to take the house from them. They're going to repossess the house in 5 days. So what can they do? They can go to an estate agent to try and sell it, which will take them between 6 and 12 months. Or what you can do is they could rent it, but if they rent it and the tenants don't pay them, then they're in the same situation. Because right now, this person cannot afford to pay the property. Okay, so now an asset is now turned to a liability. So if the property is worth 100,000, how do we make it a win-win situation so we help the seller out, and also by doing that we make money as well? Well, here's how it works. I want you to grab a piece of paper and write this down. You need to find these motivator sellers first. That's the key. That's the critical success factor for doing this. Then what you need to do is look at the figures. So let's just say the house is worth £100,000, and let's just say the mortgage on the property is also £100,000. So there's no equity in there. So if it's worth 100, they owe 100. There's no money in there, so it's now a liability. Even if they sold it through an estate agent, this person wouldn't get any money for it because they'd have to pay all the money back to the bank. Okay. Let's just say the property, the mortgage payments every single month are £300 a month, and you know that you can rent the house for £600. So the mortgage is £300 and you can rent it for £600. Now what I do is I take a lease. I take that lease agreement and I go to the person who wants to sell it, who's in trouble, and I say, look, I will rent the property from you for £300 because I know I'm going to rent it for £600. So how much do I make? A tenant pays me £600, I pay the person who's leasing it to me £300. I make £300 profit. Okay, that is the first part of lease. That is the lease part of it. Now the second part is an option. Okay, I have an option on the property. Now I want to write this down. The option gives you the right, but not the obligation. It gives you the right, but not the obligation to buy the house. Meaning, I can rent it for 5 years, but in 5 years' time, if I don't want to buy it, then I'm not going to buy it. I have a choice. I am not obligated. Okay, so that is how an option works. So how do we make money from an option? How do we as an investor make money from an option? Well, it's very simple. When I take the lease, I also put an option on the property. Now, typically I option properties for 5 to 10 years. Because in 5 years' time, it takes approximately 7.3 years for a property to double in value. So let's just say in 5 years' time, let's say it goes to 110,000. Is that okay? If it goes to 120,000, that's still okay, because I have the right to buy it at today's price rather than 5 years time or 10 years time, because in 5 years time I know the house will be worth more. If it's not, then I'll just extend the lease and I'll keep renting it and I'll keep making the £300 every single month. That is how a lease option works. I know you got a lot of questions. What happens if this happens? What happens if the interest rates go up? What happens? How do I do this legally? How do I get my team? I know you've got a lot of questions on that, and that's one of the things I want to invite you to, is to invite you to one of our events to come see how this works in practice, because there's a lot of scope for doing this. And why do you want to do this? Well, it's very simple. We said before in that example, if I'm making £300 every single month and I have 10 of these properties, okay? Remember, I didn't have to get a mortgage from the bank. I didn't have to put a deposit in to buy the property. All I did was simply have a contract that stated that I can rent it to someone else, I rent it, and then they pay me the rent and I pay their mortgage. That's it. That's exactly how it works. Very, very simple. If I have 10 of these houses, I'm making £300 a month. That's £3,000 a month, okay, that I'm getting every single month for free. You know, this is called passive income. I'm not having to work for the income. And this is one of the things I want to share with you, because I believe that once you understand how to do this, once you understand the critical success factor of finding these people and helping them, and I do mean help them. You know, I say to people, look, if you do this with me, then in the future I'm going to make money. Are you happy with that? And they say yes. And so this is what's known as a lease option. And in the option, if the property is worth 120, anytime between now and 5 years' time, I can sell that property for 120. Let's just say in 6 months' time it goes up to 120. Well, I sell it for 120 and I pay the seller, I pay them £100,000, so their mortgage is taken care of. I'm left with £20,000 and I've had £300 every single month. And I know this sounds too good to be true, and you know, that's why Vince and I, we wrote the first book in the UK to do with lease options. And you know, go and grab yourself a copy, go to Amazon, grab yourself a copy, read it. But I'm going to tell you this, that you cannot learn to read to drive. If I gave you a book to learn how to swim, you couldn't do it. That would just give you the theory. That's why I want to invite you to the event. And if you're interested in learning this stuff in a lot more detail, all I ask you to do is to fill your details in below. One of our team will call you back to see how we can help you and discuss with you where you are at the moment in your property business. Maybe you are just working. Maybe you're already investing in property. Maybe you are just looking for a second income to come in. Well, this is the best way to do it, because it allows you to make money every single month and not have to work for it. And the property values go up in value and you have an option in the property. So if it does go up in value, then you make money from that. And by doing that, you help the seller move on. Because to them, if you don't do this, then the bank is going to knock on the door and say, you know what? Give me the keys back. And then the bank will put that house into auction and they'll try and sell the property. If it's worth 100, they'll try and sell it as cheap as possible. If they sell it for 50,000, they're going to go back to the seller and say, give me £50,000. Yeah, so I've seen this happen a lot, and I've seen a lot of sellers, you know, go bankrupt because there's not enough people doing this to help them. And you know, one of the things I want to share as well is I want you guys to help other people as well. So if it's something you're interested in and you want to learn this stuff in detail, fill your details in below: name, email address, and telephone number. Please give us the right number so we can call you, discuss this with you, and see how we can work with you. My name is John Lee from Wealth Dragons. I'll see you soon. Thanks.